Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar. Our webinar today deals with funding sources that are available for Manitoban municipalities' green initiatives. My name is Cameron Hunter and I'm a policy analyst at the International Institute for Sustainable Development. Before we begin today's webinar, I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge that while this event is being held virtually, I'm located in Winnipeg, which is in Treaty 1 territory, the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Cree, OJ Cree, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. We're here today to talk about the wide range of funding sources that are currently available for municipalities' green initiatives. Today's webinar is part of a larger project that's a collaboration between IISD, EcoWest Canada, and the Government of Manitoba, with the overall goal of facilitating Manitoban municipalities' access to funding sources needed to implement your desired green actions. Today's webinar is being recorded, and I will be sharing the recording as well as other resources to help inform you about the available funding sources in a follow-up email later this week. As I was just saying, today's webinar is part of a larger project. This project has been funded by the Manitoba government, in which IISD and EcoWest Canada are working to engage with Manitoba municipalities like yourself to make them aware of all of the available funding sources currently out there for your green priorities. We're looking to help match you with funding sources that might be applicable for your municipal priorities and your municipal situations. Under activities under this project include a comprehensive scan of all of the funding sources available from the federal government, the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, and other sources. One of the most important aspects of this project is that we are currently hosting one-on-one meetings with all municipalities in Manitoba who are interested. In these meetings, Danny Robideau and myself get the opportunity to learn more about your municipality's green priorities so that we can help recommend funding sources which might match with those projects. There's also a component of this project which we'll be sending out in the new year, which is a follow-up survey to all people who we've engaged with. This survey will allow us to gauge the success of the project, as well as report back to the Manitoba government about the outcomes and the actions that may be needed to further access Manitoba municipalities. If you have any interest in booking a one-on-one meeting, or any of the funding sources that we talk about here today are of interest to you, I would recommend getting in contact with me. You can find my email address up here on the screen, or it will be included in all of the follow-up information to today's webinar. If you're looking for support, please consider contacting us to arrange a one-on-one meeting. I'm joined today by Leanne Shuchuk, who's the Director of Stakeholder Engagement and Reporting of the Climate and Green Plan Implementation Office for the Government of Manitoba, and Danny Robideau, who's the Executive Director of EcoWest Canada. Before we start on the presentations today, I'd like to give Leanne a few moments for some opening remarks. Leanne?
Good afternoon, everyone. It's so great to see so many of you here today. I'm hoping that you're going to find this helpful information and also information that you can leverage going forward. I just wanted to give you a little bit of background on where the idea for this project came from, this initiative. We've been watching as COVID, of course, has been occurring, and we've been seeing various initiatives around green economic or around economic recovery. We've certainly been tracking that there are lots of funding opportunities for green initiatives as part of this economic recovery component. The other thing that we're seeing with them, though, is that many of them are really structured around competitive processes. So we thought that this might help provide, and I should also add that the funds that are available, there's a myriad of them. They're not always easy to ferret out, and that it can be just difficult to find what funds are available and when they're available and what the requirements are. So that's the background on this initiative. We note, of course, that municipalities have been doing a great deal in this space, and that there is potential opportunities for municipalities to capitalize on funding for infrastructure upgrades, clean transportation projects, trails, and any number of other initiatives. So we hope that this information is helpful. We're very much looking forward to hearing back from you around whether or not there's merit in continuing in some way, shape, or form this kind of information stream or conversation. And I think with that, I'm just going to turn it over. We're, again, really pleased to be supporting this initiative. And again, looking forward to hearing back, you know, the input that we get and the feedback. And also looking to see Manitoba municipalities be really successful in the various funding opportunities that are available. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Leanne, for those opening remarks. I'm just going to cover briefly what we're going to talk about here today in our webinar. So I'm going to start by going over a short presentation to help you understand what constitutes a green project. And I'll presenting two quick case studies that show kind of successful examples of municipalities in Canada who have accessed these green funds for their initiatives. We'll also be doing a high-level review of some of the funding categories and funding opportunities under these categories so that we can give you a sense of what opportunities might be out there that might align with your municipal priorities. We also want to give a chance to hear back from you all in the audience. So we'll have a short interactive poll between my presentation and Danny's presentation, which will give us a chance to better understand what your municipal priorities are and if there are any barriers you have all experienced in accessing these funds in the past. I will then be turning the webinar over to my colleague, Danny, who will provide an overview of some of the key considerations you want to think about when developing a proposal for one of these funds. There will be an opportunity for Q&A at the end of today's webinar. If you have any questions for myself or either Danny or Leanne, please put your questions in of the Zoom system. We will get to as many questions in the Q&A session as we can.
Hey there, folks. Nothing like a bit of ad lib on a presentation, and seeing that technology is great, especially when it works. So as Cameron seems to have unfortunately dropped for the moment, we'll be skipping to my presentation to start first. As Cameron stated, my name is Danny Robidoux. I'm the Executive Director of EcoWest Canada. For those who don't know us, we are an environmental economic development organization, a national not-for-profit based here out of Winnipeg. Since 2017, we are, I guess, the newest member of the AMBM group. So our parent organization is the Association of Manitoba Bilingual Municipalities. Prior to being incorporated as a not-for-profit, we operated in Manitoba as a sector and a project of the Economic Development Council for Manitoba Bilingual Municipalities, and have been working in the area of sustainable development since 2008. Once incorporated, we also acted as the Prairie Regional Climate Change Advisor for the Federation of Canadian Municipalities from 2017 and 2020. So we've got a fair bit of experience in helping municipalities identify and access funding for their green initiatives. In terms of the work that we do, we work across the Western Canada, as well as in Ontario, and we focus mostly on assisting municipalities that have a population base of under 20,000 people. And the work that we do with them is very much around helping them design their environmental projects, research and develop their initiatives. We do a fair bit of writing of funding applications, as well as the writing of technical documents when it comes to implementing initiatives. We do some project management, and through the years, we developed a fairly substantive network of supporters and colleagues. So when municipalities are also looking to speak to specialized subject matter experts, we are also able to play a role in connecting them with those folks. Now, I think getting started, I'll be focusing mostly on two areas of funding applications. One is project types and the other is project phases. But in order to properly position ourselves in all this, I think it's important to note a few things, especially when it comes to the federal government and funding from the federal government. First is that the federal government has expressed that they are committed to moving to net zero emissions by 2050. So the more that we're able to demonstrate that projects have an impact on reducing greenhouse gas emissions, the greater the chances of success you will have in terms of when you submit a funding application or preparing a funding application. The second is that when it comes to waste, Canada has also set a target or a goal of zero plastic waste by 2030. So if you've got waste initiatives, and I know from my experience in speaking with a lot of municipalities across Manitoba, landfills are an issue. If you're able to address the plastic waste issue in your project development phase, that would be a great feather in your cap as well when preparing your funding application. And finally, when it comes to transportation, Canada has also set the target of all new light duty cars and passenger vehicles to be zero emissions by 2035. So the more that we're able to play a role in that transition, the better it'll be for us. And there are a fair bit of opportunities in that regard for municipalities who are wanting to do just that. So when looking at project types, I would say that the areas that I'm going to focus on are very much transportation, waste, water, and the two which are combined, buildings and energy. Looking at transportation initiatives, I think, or for all these initiatives, the main funders that we've been seeing that have been supporting these types of initiatives at the municipal level. Yes, we all know the Federation of Canadian Municipalities and their Green Municipal Fund. They offer a lot of support. But at the federal government, the departments that are providing funding for these types of initiatives are Infrastructure Canada, Environment and Climate Change Canada, as well as Natural Resources Canada. When it comes to transportation initiatives, we see active transportation as well as zero emission vehicles as two kind of key components of what the federal government is looking to finance and fund. And when it comes to zero emissions vehicles, there are two different components. One is focused on the charging infrastructure, and the other is on fleet vehicles, whether it be public transportation or municipal fleet vehicles as well. I think from what we've seen in terms of transportation initiatives, one of the challenges oftentimes is, especially for our municipalities here in Manitoba, is they're needing to be able to meet the minimum requirements of the federal programs. Oftentimes, this means that in order to do so, you would need to be able to partner with other jurisdictions in order to meet the minimum criteria of the number of charging stations that you're looking to implement. But other key components are looking at, making sure that you're able to quantify or justify the GHG emissions reductions that your project would bring to the table. So if you're able to quantify the GHG emissions and meet the minimum requirements, you'll be well positioned in order to be able to access transportation funding. When it comes to buildings and energy, key criteria again is often greenhouse gas emissions reductions, and the Federation of Canadian Municipalities has a lot of great funding programs to help you on your way to systematically implement different initiatives that will allow you to more easily access the funding that you're hoping to get in the end. So there's a lot of focus around community buildings and municipal buildings, but they also have programs around local home energy upgrades programs. Some of the challenges around these initiatives fall under the stacking requirements and funding requirements, but I'll be touching on that on a future slide. Looking at waste, There are a few areas that municipalities can be developing their initiatives. We are very much, in order to maximize your chances of accessing funding, a big component is looking at how you will be able to divert waste, whether through recycling and or composting. And then if you're looking at waste to energy initiatives, it's very important to be able to quantify, what you'll be, the amount of greenhouse gas emissions that you'll be reducing from diverting waste from the landfill, but also if you're able to use the energy for municipal buildings, the amount of greenhouse gas emissions that you'll be reducing on that front. When it comes to water, the FCM has also a number of opportunities for funding around stormwater quality, as well as septic water systems. All this under the view of how are you going to be able to reduce energy consumption and greenhouse gas emissions. Those are, so typically with these initiatives, it's ensuring that we're able to properly quantify greenhouse gas emissions. The different programs also, it should be noted, especially on the buildings front, often federal government has requirements in terms of the types of programs that are used in order to quantify those greenhouse gas emissions. And those are different from what the FCM requires and from what potentially even Efficiency Manitoba would require. So that is one thing to keep in mind when you're building your initiatives. This is essentially, this is what I'd call a bit my Wayne Gretzky slide. Everybody wants to get to the capital projects, and Wayne Gretzky was the best hockey player in the world because he ended up going where the puck was before it being there. So when we're looking at getting folks to the capital projects, it's making sure that all the other building stones or building blocks have been met and we're able to more easily access funding. So typically, and the FCM is very good at providing support for this and guiding municipalities through this process. But we're looking at making sure that, in the conceptualization phase, that, you have the proper planning documents, and and those documents are typically required in order for you to access feasibility study funding. And the feasibility study funding is required in order to build on pilot project funding. The FCM, as mentioned, offers great support in this area. So for planning and feasibility studies, the FCM is able to provide 50% funding up to $175,000 for plans and feasibility studies, covering the eligible costs. And when it comes to pilot projects, the FCM is also then able to support municipalities with their pilot projects, using 50% of covering 50% of eligible costs up to 50,000 500,000 in funding. Sorry, but for municipalities who have less than 20,000 in population, the percentage that the FCM is able to cover is actually increased to 80%. So it ends up being a smaller project, but more funding for municipalities. And finally, when it comes to capital projects, the FCM is able to provide low interest loans of up to $5 million with a grant combination included in that, where they're able to cover 15% of the loan amount. And all that is to cover 80% of the total eligible costs. I'm just going to get into a bit more of what is meant by these supporting documents. So in terms of existing plans, essentially, when submitting applications, and this applies to the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, but mostly all the federal funders as well, is that the funders are looking that the project fits within a larger vision of the municipality and their development goals. So municipal plans can be your strategic plans, your economic development plans, local development plans, local action plans, environment plans, etc. And essentially, most of you have development plans, and those would qualify as documents that are required by the funders. When it comes to feasibility studies, these feasibility studies what is essentially documents that demonstrate that in order to move to a pilot project or a capital project, that you've done your homework and that, environmentally there will be a positive impact. Financially, there is a financial analysis that there is a business case for what you're looking at, and oftentimes that includes some life cycle costing analysis. But they also want to know the methodology that it's been used in order to measure the greenhouse gas emissions, and other results of the project will be judged in terms of its performance. So those are the types of information that you would need in terms of being able to use a feasibility study to properly access funding for your initiatives. Finally, other supporting documents. What else is needed in order to be able to submit applications to federal departments as well as to the FCM? On the federal level, what we've noticed is increasingly there's a lot more emphasis being made on providing examples as to how your initiative will help the government of Canada meet its truth and reconciliation calls to action. So if your municipality hasn't done so yet, if you're able to identify how you are wanting to help achieve those calls to action, that is right now, I think that's where we've seen most municipalities struggle with being able to answer some of those questions. Is how is your initiative actually meeting some of those calls to action? There are a number of other supporting documents that are needed, and it also all depends on how the project is going to be rolled out, who the actual applicant is going to be on the funding for the funding proposal, whether that applicant is a local not-for-profit or the municipality. If it is a local not-for-profit that is submitting the application in partnership with the municipality, oftentimes those organizations need to be able to provide audited financial statements for the last couple of years, a budget for the upcoming year, some year-to-date financials, their current operating budgets, supporting work plans for the project and their milestones, as well as where project funding is coming from. Specifically to FCM funded projects, municipalities also need to be able to provide letters of support from their various stakeholders. Council resolutions are often required in order to ensure that, yes, this is an initiative that is supported by the municipality. And there also needs to be a letter that is sent to the provincial government in order to provide evidence that there has been consultation with the provincial government so that the project can move forward. All in all, the biggest challenge, I guess, is also in terms of matching funds when it comes to project development. When it comes to feasibility studies, and especially with the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, federal funds cannot be used as matching funds for those initiatives. However, provincial funds can be used. When it comes to funding and matching funds for pilot projects and capital projects, at that level, typically federal dollars can be used in order for matching. So it's always good to be able to look at the program criteria and making sure that you're able to check all the boxes prior to submitting. So in essence, that's essentially my presentation.
I think that presentation was super comprehensive, Danny. So maybe we can jump right into some of the interactive polling that we had planned here today. So it might be a good time to hear from the municipalities. So Danny had spoken about a number of different kind of funding initiatives that are funded through the FCM. So I'm just going to invite everyone to go to www.menti.com, and you can access this through your computer browser or your smartphone. And once you get to menti.com, it will ask you to input the code 79571588 to access today's online poll. So we'll just be asking a couple of questions today to better understand what municipal priorities you guys all have on your radar. So I'll give you guys a second to log in. So again, that's www.menti.com. And so based on Danny's overview, if you could just let me know what category of funding you're most interested in accessing for your municipality. Excellent. So I can see some votes coming in. So largely people are interested in waste, energy, transportation, and water. There's some interest in land use as well. Perfect. So this really just gives us an opportunity to check in to see what priorities are most important to municipalities right now. We'll let a few more votes come in. Perfect. So overall, waste projects seem to be of the most importance right now to municipalities. So we're going to jump to the next question now. So under that kind of idea of the different categories, are there specific initiatives you at your municipality are looking to fund? Is it an update to your waste management facility? Is it an organics collection system? Or in your transportation, are you looking for more kind of rural transit options or kind of electric vehicle infrastructure? So if you could just enter a short answer here about what initiatives you guys are actually looking for, just to give us a sense of what the funds we might be looking at. Perfect. So we're seeing responses about wastewater and water treatment plants. We're seeing a couple responses about active transportation routes. Organic collection seems to be coming up a couple times here as well. Also, a lot of interest, it seems, in climate change planning. Some responses about climate change action plans, but also looking to kind of deal with some of the impacts of climate change maybe. So that's kind of extreme weather events, stormwater situations. Perfect. A lot of really good responses here. We're also seeing some clean energy responses here. Perfect. Thanks for all these responses. We're just going to jump over to the next question in the interest of time. So we also are currently understanding if your municipalities have had success in accessing funds, and if so, what volume of funds have you been able to access in the past? Have it been more on the smaller side, or have you been able to access those larger capital project funds? This is interesting. There seems to be a divide, some people being able to access the larger funds and some not being able to access them. So maybe there might be some supports that might be needed for helping those municipalities out. And the last set of questions here are just helping us to understand what barriers you might be facing. So I'm just asking you all today to respond to these 5 barriers that I've listed. And if you could rank them in order from the kind of most prevalent barrier that you might experience to the least prevalent barrier. So does staff time seem to be the limiting factor in accessing some of these funds? Or are there kind of technical information needs that you're not able to kind of gather in your municipality in order to inform the proposal? Perfect. So we're seeing a lot of responses coming in, and it seems like lack of technical information and financial resources seem to be the 2 kind of main limiting factors, but staff time as well. It's kind of like watching a horse race. Sorry, I'm a little bit mesmerized. But this is really interesting in seeing what types of support might be needed to help accessing these funds in the future. The last question I'm just wondering is, are there any other barriers that we haven't talked about in our survey? Anything that you've experienced in your municipality that we've not talked about that might have limited your ability to access your funding needs? Yeah, one of the answers we've seen a number of times in talking with some municipalities is that the funding applications are quite complex. It can be kind of like trying to wander through a maze and get to the right answer at the end. It's definitely a kind of a need that needs to be addressed. Perfect. I'll give a couple more moments here to just get all your answers in. Your responses to the survey today are really helpful, and they'll really help kind of inform our report back to the Manitoba government to help them kind of develop what the next phase of this project could look like. So it's really important that we kind of make sure we're capturing everyone's input today. But I also want to take a moment just again to say that we are available for booking one-on-one meetings with all municipalities. So we have a number of times kind of currently open between now and the Christmas holidays, as well as in the new year. So if you have interest in any of the funding sources that Danny has talked about, you want to learn more about the program we're working on, please contact me. My email was up on the screen previously, and I'll throw it up again. Maybe right now, because I kind of got cut off a little bit, we'll just jump back in. And I just wanted to highlight 2 case studies today to help illustrate what a green project might look like in your community. And then we'll open it up to some Q&A. So if you have any questions, please feel free to put them into the Q&A panel of the webinar box here, and we can get to those at the end of the session. So the first case study is just coming from Yorkton, Saskatchewan, who were looking at updating their wastewater, their water treatment facilities. Their previous treatment facility had pushed all of the wastewater from the facility into their storm sewer, which was causing a clogging of the storm sewer during kind of extreme rain events. So they saw the opportunity of adding a green element to this project and were able to access FCM funding for this project since the new green element made them eligible for the funding. So what they did was they added a new wastewater recovery system, which was a number of filtration ponds that not only reduced the amount of wastewater flowing into the sewer, it also provided the community with a green space and walking trails around these wastewater facilities, and it reduced the sediment and greenhouse gas emissions of their new facility. So I just wanted to highlight this project because I think it draws light to, though not all water treatment facility upgradings might be considered green projects, there are a number of opportunities to build components into each project that have green elements that would then make you eligible to access some of these funding sources. So Danny had talked about how the FCM has a spectrum of different funding opportunities, including those for feasibility studies and planning studies. So if you are looking to kind of explore what green options might be out there for you, you could look to do some of those initial funding opportunities to look and explore different green opportunities you might have at your disposal in your municipality. The second case study here is actually from a Manitoba RM who conducted a pilot project to update their waste management stream. So previously they had been sending their waste to a regional landfill, but in this pilot project, they were piloting a new gas converter system, which took 95% of their municipal waste and converted it into a clean biogas, in which they could then use maybe to heat their new municipal buildings. But the green element in this is, one, diverting that 95% of the waste from their landfill, as well as being able to test a new kind of innovative solution that, one, lowers the greenhouse gas emissions from the regional landfill, and two, removes some of that waste that then can be used for other purposes. So I just, maybe we'll jump over to the audience Q&A now. So if you want to type any questions you might have into the Q&A box, I can field them to our speakers today. So the first question here is from Lindsay, and Lindsay's asking if there's any funding for overall environmental and climate change action planning in communities. So maybe I'll let Danny take this one.
Yeah, I think with the FCM, there are opportunities for overall climate change action plans to be developed. It would fall under their planning and easier to access for, they've got a sustainable neighborhood action planning funding. So typically for a city like Winnipeg, that might be for a neighborhood. For our smaller municipalities, that typically can cover the entire municipality because for some of them, they are the size of a neighborhood. So that's the first one that comes to mind. Other than that, I'd have to look into some other sources, but the FCM's SNAP funding would likely be the first place to look for that.
Excellent. And maybe that the call to action there ties in with the next question here. So the attendee today is just wondering if these kind of one-on-one meetings are offered at no cost to municipalities. So if you're interested in kind of learning about that funding, then I will say that yes, we have been provided the funds from the Manitoba government to hold these one-on-one meetings. So if you want to get in contact with Danny or myself to arrange the meeting, there will be no cost associated with the meeting. It's just to provide you with some advice on how to make some upfront decisions in choosing which funds might be strategic for your municipality to access. So maybe Danny, I might pass this next question over to you as well, but the question's asking, are there any programs that help municipalities partner with their local First Nations on green initiatives? Are you aware of any such initiatives?
Again, a lot of the funding that the FCM offers can be used to help First Nations partner with municipalities on green initiatives. In order for that to happen, there typically needs to be some form of service agreement between the two communities. But in the past, we have seen, for feasibility studies and pilot projects, that could happen with First Nations and municipalities. Of note, though, if funding from First Nations is being used, especially on the feasibility study side, and if you're looking to access FCM dollars for the feasibility study, there will be matching issues there because those would be considered as federal dollars, and the FCM is not allowed to match their funding for feasibility studies with federal dollars. So it all depends on the type of program and project, but in general, at that level, there are opportunities to incorporate First Nations with municipal projects. Yes.
Perfect. Our next question comes from Teresa, and Teresa's just asking if there's any information that we require prior to holding the one-on-one meetings. So Danny and I have held a number of these meetings, and we don't require you to send us any documentation or anything before the meeting. What we just ask is that you spend a little bit of time trying to maybe jot down a few notes on what your municipality's green priorities and initiatives are, and give us a bit of a baseline understanding of what you're hoping to pursue. And that way it can give us a little bit of an opportunity to review the available funds, as well as provide you with some information about which funds might be most strategic for you. So if you want to get in touch with us, we'll send a list of kind of 5 short questions that you can think about before your meeting. And then when you show up to the meetings themselves, Danny and I will kind of lead you through the process. Another question may be best suited for you, Danny, but the federal funding requires the projects go through a climate lens exercise. Do you have any suggestion on how a smaller municipality might work through that process?
I guess it all depends on the project that is being looked at. Some of that could be addressing the energy consumption and forecasting the reduction on the energy load by municipal buildings, for example. I know that with the Green and Inclusive Community Buildings Fund, one of the assessments that is required is that for building retrofits that the community go through a RET screen analysis. Those are typically conducted by people with certification or qualifications in order to do that. Other assessments or impacts that need to be looked at occasionally as well are the environmental impact or how to mitigate against the climate change and climate risks. Some of that information can be used through the Prairie Climate Center, for example, and their climate atlas as to what your current risk is at. But it very much depends on the project itself, I guess the way that it will be reducing its impact on the climate, whether GHGs or as an adaptation project, so it depends, and I think part of it is also depending on who you have around on your project team. If you have engineers or architects on staff, they can also help with that, or on the team, they can also help with that form of assessment.
Are there any other questions people would like addressed today? Maybe give a few more moments for people to type in their questions, but if not, maybe I'll just take one further opportunity just to remind you to please sign up for the one-on-one meetings with Danny and myself if you are interested. I will put my contact information back here up on the screen so you can send me an email if you would like. Leanne, would you have a few questions or comments?
Thanks. Thanks, Cameron. I just wanted, with respect to this last question, it's a great question. One of the things I do want to draw your attention to is that there currently is funding for, there's funding through BRACE. So the province of Manitoba has partnered with Natural Resources Canada to deliver professional development to engineers, community planners, that sort of thing. So we're looking at, over the next couple of months, over the next about 12 to 18 months, to see around 1,000 professionals and community leaders trained on climate adaptation. So that may help you develop your plan. If you have a planner or access to a planner, they may be able to help you develop your own in-house plan. But also don't hesitate to reach out. I didn't actually advise, this is probably not so usual for you. I am not with municipal relations. I'm with conservation, so I'm in the Climate and Green Plan Implementation Office. And so just to let you know where our lens is coming from, but there may also be some additional supports through our office as well. So if you want to get in touch with Cameron on that question, he can reach out and connect us.
Thanks, Leanne. I just want to say thank you for everyone who participated in today's webinar. I know there were a few technical issues, so I apologize for those. I'll be sending a follow-up email to everyone who participated today, and this email will include a recording of today's webinar, as well as a list of all 47 funds that IISD and EcoWest have reviewed for you to look over. So please take a look at that list that we're sending out. Any of these funds are of interest to you, please book a follow-up meeting with Danny and myself. Thank you again for attending. And as you exit today's webinar, you will be asked to just complete a short survey. We would very much appreciate your feedback on today's webinar. And if not, have an excellent afternoon. Thank you.